that's where the magic starts to happen. When you get the coaches together, because again, this is your product, this is what you're putting out. Even if your workouts are good, even if your sessions are good, like this is where you really start to dial in, because you start to, again, peer review, check, and there's a whole system that we use for that, which might be another podcast. But how can you make this like that much better, even if it's 1 degree? And then it's not even just the programming, it's the delivery. And you start role playing and talking about, how do we explain this exercise? Like, what's an alternative for that exercise, right? And like, again, that's where the magic happens, because I think that's where the client experience starts to improve.
Welcome to the Fitness CEO Podcast.
Hey friends, welcome back to another amazing episode of the Fitness CEO Podcast. And before I introduce today's guest, I want to give you a friendly reminder to give us a like, give us a subscribe on YouTube, and write us an awesome review on iTunes. That way we can keep producing this content for you for free. So now to introduce today's guest, who's a dear friend of mine since back in 2015. He started within the Fit Body Bootcamp organization as an intern, then to a coach, then to a head coach, then to an integrator, and now he is an on-site experience coach who basically leads the onboarding of new franchise partners, in addition to being newly awarded CAP coach, which stands for Coaching and Profitability Coach here at Fit Body Bootcamp. Has been a game changer in our brand. So without further ado, welcome my friend, Mr. George Vidosh. My man, George Vidosh, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. So very fired up about this. And just to kind of give you some back context, you've been in the brand for going on 6 years now, and just been an incredible, I guess, facility leader, integrator, head coach at Berkeley Fit Body Bootcamp, which I just provided your introduction. So this all in mind, the topic of this episode is really breaking down what the Coaches L10 is. So my first question for you, George, before we actually get into specifically the Coaches L10, what is an L10? It really comes from the EOS system. So can you provide a little backdrop there, my friend?
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm not going to go super deep level on EOS. I think you probably have to have some understanding or training on the entrepreneurial operating system and the L10 meetings, because the Coaches L10 that we're going to talk about today is almost like a smaller version or spin-off of the L10 meeting in that complete format. But yeah, it's a L10 or level 10 meeting from EOS.
Yep. And
obviously that means that you're trying to run an awesome meeting at level 10. And that's your goal at the end of every meeting, including these smaller meetings and multiple meetings and check-in meetings with your coaches and your teams. So it kind of puts the emphasis to making these super efficient and productive. And that's my biggest thing with making them an L10 meeting versus just saying like, hey, our coaches are going to get together and chat, or we have another meeting, if that makes sense. So yeah, the structure of that L10 meeting is very formatted, and it provides structure, and just, in my opinion, makes it so much better. So L10 meeting for sure.
Love it. Awesome. And you kind of touched upon this. There's actually a few different types of L10 meetings within our organizations here at Fit Body Bootcamp, borrowing off the EOS framework. And L10 really just stands for level 10. You're trying to get a 10 out of 10. Now, human nature never always rolls that way, but that's just the vision behind this. And really, the L10 is more the structure of the meeting, very efficient, optimized, really delivered to get the best results. So that all in mind, the subject of this particular podcast episode is really diving into the Coaches L10. I wanted to provide a little bit of framework to kick us off. But before we kind of go through the nuts and bolts, this is something that you at Berkeley and Barrett, my brother, implemented in 2022 last year. Is that right?
Yeah, so for sure. We always had like a meeting for coaches, or like a spot for them to come together and communicate, and really specifically what we're going to talk about, what they do in that meeting. Mm-hmm. And a big one is go through the programming, the workouts, and then how that all ties into client experience. But it was just recently, last year, that we were like, hey, this needs to, again, become a level 10 meeting, because what we were doing was not efficient, was not good enough. It wasn't checking all the boxes. So yeah, changing it just recently to an L10. And that's where I was like huge, like aha moment for me. Like, not only is this way better now, but all of my meetings need to become, or a lot more of my meetings need to become this style. And we actually probably need to add more meetings in more departments, versus my personal, I guess, like thought on meetings before may have been like, hey, this is a waste of time. Like we need to cut meetings, get rid of them. I want to go work and not be sitting in meetings all day.
Yeah, so it's really about the efficiency, consistency across the board. So you had a quote unquote meeting for coaches, but it really wasn't in L10 format. But in 2022, last year, you basically made that adjustment. What would you say, George, from your lens, has been the biggest benefit of executing a coaches, specifically Coaches L10, to your facility, to your location, to your clients, just in general? What would you say high level before we kind of go through the nuts and bolts? What's the biggest high level benefit?
I always look at it as like, what's the point of the meeting? And it had a point before, but now we can use that time specifically. For me, it's client experience. So everything goes back to, are we improving client experience? Because the coaches back to EOS, the accountability chart, you're sitting in the coaches like kind of box, right? Mm-hmm. Or that column, if you will. And they need to have a meeting, but what's their service that they're providing is the sessions, is the coaching and to the clients. So it all comes back to client experience, like how are the workouts, how's the programming, and how's the actual experience. So that gives us that ability to work on that every single week, like in cadence without missing.
And I'm going to take that even a step further because that's incredible value. But I think, and what I've seen from your location, George, from many other locations within our brand that have started executing these Coaches L10, because you talked about the benefits of the client experience. And when your clients have a better experience, they stay, they pay, and they refer. So the huge value of this is a huge retention play, in addition to adding culture and community. So, it all comes back to profitability is really the name of the game. So I love that. You talked a little bit about some of the components specifically in the Coaches L10, but how granular do you get? Specifically, if you were to break down the client experience, I mean, you're talking about injuries, are you talking about attendance, are you about check-ins? Like, what are some of this like granular level, the components of that Coaches L10?
Sweet. Awesome. Let's do this into a Coaches L10 meeting. So you'll notice like we pull stuff from like the structure of an L10 meeting from EOS. So we always start with good news for sure. Just getting everyone like talking, communicating, going around and making sure everyone's like there, present, ready to plug in. We do have a headline section. And in the headline section, we'll be hitting on anything that's coming up. So again, these are little things, but little things that I think go a long way. Again, back to the customer and client experience when your coach is on the same page with like, hey, what are we announcing this week? Hey, what do we have coming up? Hey, what day do we start announcing for this? So you don't have different coaches announcing and talking about different things, like just super aligned on that. So headlines, you get into to-dos, which another huge benefit of making this an L10 meeting is that built-in accountability when you go around and you make sure everyone has done their to-dos.
And that's pretty self-explanatory, but just in case our audience has never heard of EOS, never heard of L10 before, and doesn't really understand, okay, to-dos, but really what's that format? How do you capture to-do and how is that assigned?
Awesome. So during the meetings, to-dos may come up. And I think this is a big takeaway and maybe even a difference in the Coaches L10, how we do it. Some of the to-dos could be super like basic or even weekly to-dos for the coaches, for the team. But again, it's built-in accountability to make sure that they're actually executing it. So a to-do in an L10 meeting would just be like, hey, we all need to make sure that we like practice this certain like role play this week. Everyone's going to make sure they have one or two roles or runs at this.
So everyone would literally be assigned, like that's the action step they need to, quote unquote, to do for this coming week by the time the next L10 comes.
Like, hey, everyone's going to watch 10 minutes of themselves coaching on film by next week and come back next week to discuss it. So that would be on there when you come to it. Hey, everyone watched their film? Yes, cool, because that's going to be an IDS today. We're going to talk about it.
Cool.
So, but again, even little things like, did you program your workouts? Like, are we, pushing ahead on things that are maybe down the road that aren't thinking about, but just to check in, like, hey, are you on track with your cert that you're working on? Did you write your workouts this week? Did you clean this week? Like all those little things that I think can like just not have a place, or you as a leader forget to just hold them accountable for. And that all lives here now, which like frees up so much of my brain space to be like, oh, I don't have to check on that. I don't have to check on that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's super helpful for me. And then anything from any of that discussion gets dropped down into IDS, the Identify, Discuss, and Solve section that we go through. And that's the meat, or the majority of the meat of that meeting is still spent in IDS.
Now, specifically from a cadence and a timing on these, typically speaking, the way EOS basically recommends and executes their L10 meetings are 90-minute meetings. However, a Coaches L10, the framework is kind of a sub L10 within, I guess, the facility L10. So from a timing perspective, how long do you execute the Coaches L10?
Yeah, so we do 60 minutes, and I feel like you could do anytime you want, right? You could make it longer or shorter, and this was a big aha that was part of last year when we switched it to be an L10 meeting, because in my head I thought, like L10, it has to be 90 minutes, like you're going through everything. World Conference 2022, Brian Underhill said something to the effect of, you can have a 15-minute L10, or you can have an L10 even with yourself, right? And I was like, what? That's awesome. So our coaches meeting then became an L10, right? It's 60 minutes. We sometimes finish in less time, but that's the time we have, 60. So definitely shorter.
That was the big aha you had at World Conference.
Yeah.
Love that. Now here we are executing as a brand based off your execution, and now teaching our audience, which is incredible. When you had that big aha, and of course you have the accountability, the facility L10, and then you're like, oh, you know what? We've had a coaches meeting, quote unquote general meeting, which is probably leaps and bounds versus the average gym, across the nation, truth be told. But you really wanted, George, at your location to kind of iron it out, make it L10, create some structure, etc. After you walked away from World Conference, you had this vision. It always comes down to leadership and implementation. So my guess is, being that you already had a built-in meeting, it probably wasn't too big of a transition, although I don't want to make that assumption. Was there any kickback? And I guess, what was the feedback from the team when you basically presented this vision?
I think it's still honestly a work in progress. So it definitely wasn't like perfect immediately, even though we were running L10, like our other L10 meeting every week. That was the benefit of it, is like working through it with the team and like cleaning things up as we go. Like so many sidebar discussions and inefficiencies, and like not coming out with a clear to-do list, or getting everyone on the same page with cascading messages to anyone who's not there. Like that wasn't happening when we were just like sitting down and chilling and going through the workouts for the week. So it was a work in progress. It still is.
Yeah.
But I think it just continues to get better.
What about who actually runs the L10? So I want to kind of take a step back, and I'm going to provide a little coaching from a FitBody Bootcamp location accountability chart. You have the integrator, who's really the boss. The integrator, basically all the different 6 buckets or departments, you could call it, within each of our FitBody gym locations, all feed up. So we have a finance bucket, we have a sales bucket, we have a marketing bucket, we have a coaching bucket, or operations, which is in general, business speak, but specifically in the gym business, operations is coaching. So you have these 6 different buckets, if you will. One of the other, I guess, the one I left out is administration. If I've left out any others, forgive me. But regardless, this is a Coaches L10. So my thought would be the person on the high level of the accountability chart from the coaching realm, which would be, running the meeting. But is that true? And kind of what does that look like in your location?
It's the head coach. So that's the simple answer. Like whoever sits on the top of that bucket in the accountability chart, in my opinion, should run that meeting. So it's the head coach. In our facility, I sit in the head coach role currently, so I run the meeting.
Going back to the other question too, because I always think about implementation, because it's one thing to learn something in theory, but it's also another thing to put it in practice. So as you mentioned, it's a work in progress. What were some of the bottlenecks and kinks that you had to work through, maybe from your own perspective, or maybe just things like that came up from your team's perspective, the hemming or the hawing or the kinks that kind of went through? Because I want to not only be able to teach the framework of really the value and the benefit, but also too, okay, now you have the framework. Here are some probably obstacles that you're gonna be in the way once you start implementing.
Yeah, you might have like kickback from your team if you've been doing it a certain way. So I think just showing them the benefits, like presenting it to them, but really showing them like why we're doing it this way. And I think they'll see like over time, like how it's so much better.
Yeah.
Right. And then I think the second part of that is just as you're going through with your team and transitioning to running that meeting, being open to feedback on how you do it. And like, hey, you want to talk about something in the L10 meeting, anyone can add something to IDS still. So like, yeah, if there's something that you think is missing or could be improved, like just continue to evolve it and make it better.
Something that, especially when you kind of teed up the different types of L10 meetings you have. And L10, again, just to really reinforce, that's the framework for the meeting. It's the system we use at US. But we just talked about the facility L10, the coaches L10, potentially an admin L10. You can do an L10 by yourself. My thought, maybe some of our audience's thought is like, George, that's a lot of L10s. That's a lot of meetings. That's actually like seems to be very overwhelming. So can you speak to that? Like how many meetings or how many L10s are too much? What does that look like from your lens?
I think I had that as like, can you have too many meetings? And I think previously I would have said like, yes, absolutely. And I would probably be of the fact or the opinion, like cut the meetings. Like they're not productive and I don't want to just sit there and have meetings all week. I want to go do work. But that L10 really changes that because one, doesn't have to be long. You can shorten it. So we do have an admin L10, which is 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay.
But
do you run that as well?
I do not. The client coordinator or the head admin will run that meeting.
Copy.
But it's just that consistency of doing it every week, even if you have nothing to talk about or very short meeting, but you still come together and like, hey, do you need anything? Do we have anything coming up? Is there anything that needs to be communicated or worked on? Like, no, okay, well then cool, like done, like let's go. But then that's total clarity and issues are solved. Like it's just so good to have that cadence. So my opinion or like my thought on that as you look at it, should you have more meetings or if that feels like too much overwhelming is like, just don't go crazy. Like start simple, like make it short, but have those touch points. So I'm thinking back on like all the meetings you can have. And if I were to ask you, I guess, like in your opinion, do you think that people are doing the meetings they should, for example, like a weekly L10 meeting? Like, do you think they need to do that or yes, or more of those? Yes or no? You would probably say yes.
100%.
What about like a Coaches L10 meeting?
100%. But I think it comes down to your point, like the efficiency, the clarity, it's not just you're throwing stuff on the wall, like you have an organized structure for it. And I think that's the big value. So I say it with a caveat, assuming that you're executing this format, the value's there.
For sure. But even like your one-on-one weekly check-ins with your coaches, should you have those?
Yes.
Do you think more people are doing those or not doing those?
Unfortunately, less.
Yeah. What about like quarterly meetings, like planning out your rocks? Like, you know what I'm saying? So when you look at it like that, like so much value, and we would just be lost when you look at it now without all those meetings.
Yeah.
And you could be like, oh, that's too many meetings. Or you could do all the meetings and figure out your rocks and check in with your people and drive towards the rocks and like off you go. So,
and have a massively profitable business as a consequence of that.
Yeah, for sure.
What's up, my friend? Bryce here. Now, you might know me as the co-host of this podcast and the CEO of FitBody. But what many people don't know is that I actually began my journey as a FitBody franchise owner. Now, being an owner, I wake up every day absolutely doing what I love. I live my passion. I help people transform their lives and have both financial and personal freedom. And it's for these reasons and many more that other owners join the brand and open their own FitBody locations too. So if you're looking to build a highly profitable business, take charge of your life, and create an impact in your very own community, then opening a FitBody gym might be a perfect fit for you. Now, to see if a territory is available in your area, as we have very limited spots due to our incredible growth, go ahead and visit our website at fbbcfranchise.com to complete an application. Well, thanks, and back to the show.
I want to still dive in a little bit more, but then we'll kind of bring it out for a high level question. You talked about the consistency, that cadence of consistency. So what is, when do you have the Coaches L10? I'm just curious, two-part question, like, just the general recommendations from EOS. And then specifically, I just want to unpeel under the hood in Berkeley. When do you have those meetings?
So it's weekly,
okay,
and ours is on Monday. And
why Monday?
Yeah, I think Monday works well because, and I can go through like what we usually spend the most of the time in IDS going through, and a big one of that is programming, going through the workouts for the next week.
Yeah, let's go
so
that.
When we do it on Monday, we go through the workouts from Tuesday, the next day, all the way through the following Monday, right? So then that whole next week, everyone's on the same page, aligned. Workouts are peer reviewed and checked and ready to rock and roll.
And let me interject here real quick. Have those workouts, because you're meeting on Monday, and then you're really basically giving an overview from Tuesday to the following, Saturday. So you're kind of talking about the week ahead. Are those workouts already programmed at that point, or are you programming in the moment, or are you basically just getting peer check and making sure everyone's on the same page?
Yeah, programmed before, and again, there's your accountability, because like, when does your workout have to be done by? Like, at the very latest by the L10, because like you're there going through it it's your workout. Like, it better be done.
And one coach programs for that entire week.
We do it a little differently. We do have it broken up. So coaches have a day or a couple of days each week, and then they just rotate through.
But regardless, that whole like programming is complete on that Monday, and then in the L10, kind of what you alluded to, then you're actually, each coach is breaking down the workout so everyone's on the same page and has a good understanding of the program for that following week.
Yes, sir.
Awesome.
And I think that's where the magic starts to happen. When you get the coaches together, because again, this is your product, this is what you're putting out. So even if your workouts are good, even if your sessions are good, like, this is where you really start to dial in, because you start to, again, peer review, check, and there's a whole system that we use for that, which might be another podcast. But how can you make this like that much better, even if it's 1 degree? And then it's not even just the programming, it's the delivery. And you start role playing and talking about, how do we explain this exercise? Like, what's an alternative for that exercise, right? And like, again, that's where the magic happens, because I think that's where the client experience starts to improve. That's my favorite part.
Okay, copy that.
Yeah.
What else in terms of the mechanics? Can I kind of open up that question?
Yeah.
I think
so
you want
the
to break it down.
3 big things that I like to make sure we cover in the meeting, like in general or in the IDS section, is communication. So get everyone on the same page. Like, everyone has to be aligned. No confusion on like stuff that's coming up, like how we do things, like issues with clients, everything and anything. All the coaches need to know exactly what they're doing.
And let me interject here a little bit. And you talk about communication. That was like a general term, but specifically one thing you said earlier in the show was about announcements, right? Mm-hmm. And is that something you dive in here?
Yeah, for sure.
And let me interject on my perspective, and I'm curious on yours. But one thing, without your coaches having like a very clear understanding of the announcements, how to make those announcements, and I've been guilty of this. It's like, okay, cool, just give a high level understanding of the team or communication, what needs to be communicated. But George, what's broken down for me, and I know many other gym owners, is, okay, you can give like a general overview, but really when that each individual coach takes that information and actually breaks it down and communicates, it comes out very, very differently. And you can have very, very different results, which can be problematic, especially if you're trying to promote an event or a challenge or a nutrition coaching program where you're trying to drive results. So for me, that specific piece, and just giving our audience some guidance, especially if you haven't been in the gym industry and you're becoming a gym owner, that's very important to make sure that your coaches are all clear in the communication, can articulate the message in the same way.
That is 100% it. And that is what not only we talk about, but then we can literally role play in this meeting. So I'll give you a silly example. We got the FBC like sweat towels, right? And we're going to start selling those. This was a couple months ago. And I was like, all right, sweet. We have these towels. Like, you guys make sure we announce it.
And left it at that.
And left it at that.
Which I've been, I know where this is going, not specifically, but I've been there, done that, and it typically doesn't end well, but continue on.
No, for sure. And it seems funny, but it also is, like, for me, the ultimate cringe, because we literally had a coach, like, on the mic at the end of a session say the exact words. I don't remember all the words, but it was sweat rag for sale, right? Something to that effect. So that's like,
sign me up, Coach
like
George.
So silly and so simple. Like, they should just be able to figure it out. But I don't want to say they can't, but they need direction. They need guidance. Like, how are we? Because it is literally a sale then, and that's where it gets like exponentially better. Like, you're selling it. This is our brand new microfiber FBC towel. It's so soft. You can, if you're sweating all over, you go grab one of these from the front desk. It's only $12, right? And like, just literally go around and make them say like, hey, you're on the mic, end of session. How are you announcing that we have a new flavor of protein? Like, how are we actually going to announce that?
And you, week? George, you actually will execute role play to hear them get feedback and give them feedback.
Oh yeah. 100%.
My friends, I'm going to pause here. Like, this is so little, but my brother Barrett actually always says this quote, big doors swing on little hinges. And this is a little hinge that opens up a big door, not only in terms of towel sales, nutrition sales, t-shirt sales, merchandise sales, just making sure that your team's on the same page. Because it's not the person. It typically comes from the leadership and the communication. And of course, we have a lot of trials and tribulations and battle scars, if you will. But I just want to take a second to highlight, because that's so important.
And that's like a $12 example, but it's everything. It's what we're communicating, and can the coaches and everyone on the team communicate a good and consistent message, which the next one could be like, hey, I hurt my back. I want to cancel my membership. Like, what did we say to that person? Well, now you can put that on IDS and be like, hey, let's role play. How do you have that conversation? So like, literally anything and everything is fair game. But that's how I think we've been able to raise the client experience, Because before we might have a training, like a once in a blue moon, oh my gosh, we need to have a quarterly team meeting, or like we're going to talk about something. Or maybe you have communicated and trained one or two people on your team really well, but then
not the rest
of them.
Yeah.
And then my favorite one, and the last part, is when you have someone new come on your team, or when you have turnover with your coaches. It can feel like you have to, start over and like add in all this stuff and do all this training. But if you have a regular, again, like almost like a curriculum of going through the questions, teaching them how to do these things, where does it happen? In the Coaches L10 every week, no matter what. They come in, they join the meetings, and they're indoctrinated like just naturally.
Love it, George. And just to your credit, man, from taking this and then really taking strong action, we've been able to kind of glean your wisdom and be able to share this with the brand. And for my locations, we just started in December of 2022, so it's new in the grand scheme of things, but already seeing incredible results. Our coaches understand our clients' industries better, can make announcements better. Just overall, the engine is working a lot better. So I appreciate that. To kind of put a bow on this before we transition the lightning round, is there anything missed from your lens? Like, thinking from the audience who are interested in owning their own gym. They're excited. They're probably overwhelmed. They're thinking, oh my God, there's a lot of meetings. However, that's the value of our franchise system. We have that kind of colored for you. But from your lens, is there anything else that we missed, that we didn't cover, that we need to basically drill in a little bit more, be able to provide, the true value, the benefits, and some context around the Coaches L10, the value it's brought to Berkeley?
The biggest thing is, and you can talk about my personality if you want to, and like I'm an owl. So I like details and structure and organization, but that's really what it brings, because it gives you an outlet. It gives you a space to do anything and everything that you need to do on a weekly consistent basis. So we didn't even really talk about programming a whole lot, but again, just being able to clean that up with your team and get everyone in perfect alignment in that weekly meeting, like that was the main reason to start it. And I think that is the biggest effect it has.
Do you think because the programming from a coaching perspective is complex? I mean, that's really like our product, right? So because of the complexity, that's probably the biggest value that you saw to bring this table in addition to all the other benefits.
Yeah, that's it. Like, in my opinion, that is the product. So we better be working on it like every week. And I felt like we were, but we weren't trying to like raise it or like really polish it to the next level.
Love it, my man, George. Well, this has been great. We still got a few more minutes if you're up for it, but man, appreciate you sharing your knowledge, my friend.
Yeah, of course.
All right, we're in the passion-based business, lightning round. What's your biggest passion these days, my friend, and why?
Helping people has always been my passion, and I don't know if you're gonna ask me this later, but I always knew I wanted to help people. Had lots of different ideas how to do it. But I think it maybe will transition from helping clients to helping other coaches and doing things like this, but it's always just providing value, helping people.
So George just alluded to, and we kind of provide a little bit of visibility, but he just got brought on. He is one of our anchors at our on-site experience. We actually have two locations, one in California, one in Michigan, that George oversees the Michigan location for on-site experience. He just got awarded a CAP coach position, which stands for Coaching and Profitability. And there's just a lot of vision and opportunity ahead of us to be able to have George and his team coach our coaches and really level up our brand, because our team's our product and our coaching is our product. It's kind of similar, in a different way. If you have a steak restaurant, your steak is your product. In the fitness industry, this coaching and leveling up our team is our product. So what would be a unique value bomb or something you could tell your former self before, launching the Coaches L10? What would be your advice to the younger coach George before executing this, in your gym?
I mean, advice to myself would be to get uncomfortable sooner. Like, just start putting yourself out there more. So I guess that's pretty much it. I think I was comfortable being comfortable and like good with the status quo, like happy with how everything was, but not pushing myself outside that comfort zone. And specifically with this L10 meeting, or when you're starting to add in meetings, I mean, I just think start doing it. Like, even if you have a terrible meeting, and you can rewind the clock 4 years to when we first did run our first L10 in general, like when we first started following EOS, and like those meetings were terrible too. Like, and that took 6 months to dial in as well. So yeah, just start, have a meeting, have a touch point, and then keep working on it.
Love it. And of course, if you're a franchise partner at FitBody, just reach out to your CAP coach and help get support to make it even better. This next question, I have two left for you, George. Typically ask when it's an owner facing, and your role is not an owner within the brand, but you are a rising star and someone that I see, and my brother and my leadership team see so much continued value that's going to help take FitBody Bootcamp to the moon. So very grateful for you, my friend. But from your lens, what's been the biggest thing coming in as a head coach, a facility leader we used for a while, and an integrator? What's been the biggest value to you in the organization? Why have you stayed? Why have you really, wanted to continue to develop your career at FitBody? And I'm asking that just so the future or audience who's listening to this, who's like, oh, I want to open a gym. How do I recruit, attract, and really develop a guy like George? What makes him tick? Why is he within the organization? Because if I know the why, then I can replicate that. So from your lens, what would that answer be?
It's super simple, but it's the vision, the opportunity. I mean, I can expand on that.
Please.
But that's it. When I've literally gone through every stage from coming in as an intern. I was part-time for a little while. I was doing some other random stuff, but then full-time facility leader and just onward and upward. And it was always clear that there was an opportunity and a carrot, something to chase, somewhere to go. Mm-hmm. And you weren't just going to be stuck at one level, working for somebody for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So that was it. The vision and everything that we're doing and building and growing, that whole mindset, I think, is what I wouldn't say it attracted me in the first place because it's kind of random how I came in. But once I was there, that's what kept me.
What kept you?
For sure.
And it's funny, we were just shooting a show with Mr. Stephen Hadley from Daphne, Alabama, and we were doing the breakdown, Nick Saban, and one of his leadership breakdowns is providing vision, clarity, and never promising more than opportunity. But if you can promise more opportunity, then the rest takes care of itself. So
yeah, that's it.
All right, my dude. Last question, and the title or the name of this podcast is the Fitness CEO Podcast. So from your lens, George, what does it mean being a CEO to you?
You get to make decisions, which also means you have to make decisions. So I think that's what a CEO means to me because it's cool, right? You get to be the CEO and top dog or whatever. So you get to make the decisions, but that also means that you have to make the decisions, even the hard ones. So that's what I got.
The blessing and the curse. It comes with massive opportunity, but also massive responsibilities, the way I heard that.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is so true. George, before we wrap today, man, I just want to take a second to show you some love, some praise, some gratitude. It's been incredible to be on this journey together. We've worked with each other for loosely the better part of going on 6 years now. And what you've done in our organizations here in Michigan, from a coaching perspective, from a development perspective, now leading our on-site experience, branch in Michigan, which is basically coaching new franchise partners to incredible success. Now your role on CAP. And just your commitment and your passion is absolutely contagious. And you've already done so many great things for our brand. And I'm just excited because we're just scratching the surface. So I want to take a second to acknowledge you for that, my friend.
Oh, thank you so much. And thanks for the opportunity, just like you said, because that's what it is.
You got it, my brother. Well, friends, I know you got a ton of value from this episode. Assume you did. Give us a like, give us a subscribe on YouTube, and better yet, share this with someone in need, running a business, potentially opening a gym like yourself. And my friends, we'll see you in the next episode.